You are live.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi. So we're going to talk today about splitting, but first I'd like to show you my coffee cup. And some of these turn their phone down. I got this coffee.
It's from you.
Well, you know, I got this coffee cup from one of our dear employees. It says, "Dear boss, thanks for being my boss. If I had a different boss, I would punch him in the face and go find you." I don't know how to take that, but
Somebody loves it.
somebody else.
I paid somebody good money to keep quiet about that.
I have no doubt. All right, so here's what I wanted to show first.
Oh, that's nice. You got a great piece of leather there.
Well, not really, but
So for those of you that don't remember, today we told you we were going to talk about splitting.
I didn't remember.
See, he didn't remember.
that's why I text you.
So what earthly purpose is this helping our fan base to appreciate? You just showed them the flat outside of a piece of leather.
And all four pieces, I'd count, all four pieces of it are identically shaped because they were taken through the splitter layer by layer
Fancy.
by layer.
I got it.
So now why would you want to be able to do it?
Well, I know if I was a saddle type guy and I had 20 zillion pieces of 12-ounce saddle skirting that I didn't know what to do with, I'd like to go split it down and make a wallet out of it.
Okay, so which piece do you want to use for the wallet?
Well, you can't use but only one, really,
Why not?
because they don't have a grain on them.
What if I had a piece of real thin snakeskin?
Does that have grain?
No. This is still a piece of grain on it. But what if I had a piece of snakeskin and I wanted to make the wallet back out of it?
Well, if it was me, I'd use one of these splits without the grain, and I'd laminated that snake or ostrich or something to it because it would hold better to start with.
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't have to sand.
Okay, so what you're
Resanded.
telling me then is this has some perceived value.
Oh, it definitely had value.
So what if I wanted to do an inlay on a sheath that you wanted to pop up, like I seen the one at lunch the other day that you did? Could you use that behind this?
Yeah, you sure could.
So in other words, I could take a piece of this and I could cut it out in the diamond shape that you had, and I could glue a piece of snake over top of it, and it would stick up whatever the thickness of this and the snakeskin is.
That's right.
And that would allow it to,
A little bit of a three-dimensional inlet.
I'm talking to Chad.
okay. All right.
We got all sorts of camera switching going
I know.
on.
Have you done the video that I want you to do?
No, we haven't done it yet.
Man, we are going to do a video about
Videos.
just how cool we are with our videos now.
We're getting kind of snazzy over here.
Okay, so the benefit to this though is really
Because I have to.
the benefit really is to be able to use all the leather pieces.
Okay, now there's some caveats here.
Okay.
Going back to your snake, you have to be a little bit careful here. Because if you do cover this glorious split with your snakeskin, that's fine. You can make a wallet out of it, and it'll probably work pretty darn good as long as you stitch it by machine around the edge. Now, you could lace it, but that's where you gotta be careful, because depending on the split, that might be prone to breaking the fibers around the edge where it bends.
So
That's important.
it is important. And so what you're telling me then is it's important from where the split came from.
Yes.
Which part of the animal
And
body.
fibers of leather are something that we're gonna talk about a little bit,
Okay.
because that's important.
So this was taken down, and they took it down just as thin as they could get. And I want to show you one of the problems when you get too thin. Can you see the holes?
It's air conditioned.
It's conditioned, okay.
Breezy.
So the other thing is that it seems to be just a hair firmer, maybe thicker on this side than it is on this side. So splitting is not a
Everybody
Oh,
thinks it's so simple.
It's not really all that friendly. Now, here's the thing: is we got a little rain yesterday, so we got a little humidity in the air. The sun started to come out. The Turner was running great this morning for the camera.
The Turner split.
Yes, it was running great this morning for the camera. Those are Lefty's words, not mine. So what happens here is it could be that there was a damaged spot in the piece of leather, and so we basically ran it so thin that it ran through that spot. This could also be a fluctuation in the blade. So the leather splitters blades can start out 4 and 5 inches wide. Once they get down to about 1 1/8 inches, that's about the end of the life of the blade on a big splitter like our Turner. So there could also have been a harder spot in this piece of leather where the blade just jumped,
And just left it right here.
and there it is, right
Right
there. And so there's things, there's challenges.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, how many times have we gotten a cow side in, even a side of skirting, or for that matter, just a plain old side of Herman Oak strap leather, and on the back you see all these tiny little black specks. They're about the size of half of a match head. Well, you know, that tells us immediately what happened. That cow got shot by a shotgun, and the grain area is pretty much okay because the cowhide's really thick and the pellets went in, they healed over, and the cow went on his happy little way after he got stung. But from the backside, you find those little black spots and you pop out shotgun pellets.
Or
Yes.
half of one. that's
Or
like
half of
split
a
in
pellet. And because, yeah, why would it be half of a pellet?
Because it went through the
Because
splitter.
it went through a splitter, wreaked havoc upon their blade, and it split those little lead pellets right in half. Now you gotta pick them out, put a pain in the rear of that.
Well, and now you got the next side that goes through has lines,
Yeah,
and those lines are because there's now a nick in the blade, and so you've got to grind through the nick in the blade and get that out. The other thing is truth be told, the firmer the leather is, the easier it is to split, because the less
fiber difference.
Yeah. If you got like something that's milled or like the fiber's been broken down, it's stretchy
So-
and it pulls.
well, and not only that, it actually goes through like dough, and
Yeah.
it squeezes it down real thin, which it causes it to wad up back here.
Yeah.
And then when those wads go through, it actually cuts the bottom off of them, and now it looks like spaghetti.
Yeah, so when we split leather, think of it this way. Splitting is based upon two things. Number one, it's based upon sharp.
Blade.
You cannot split leather unless that blade is so stinking sharp that it is scary.
Literally.
Very scary. I mean, you wouldn't want to push on the blade or touch the blade at all because it will cut you badly.
Yeah, it doesn't have to even
It
be
will
running.
cut.
The other thing that splitting is based on is pressure. That pressure is formed from two standpoints. One, you have a fixed base, a roller. But the other one is a top roller that you're able to control the pressure. Am I correct? Correct. So when you have a little bitty splitter that's this wide, like maybe one of the hand splitters that you mount on your bench, and you take a belt, you stick it in there and you pull the end through, those are pretty happy. But the wider your splitter gets, giving you more ability to split a wide piece of leather, the more challenging and the more perfect things have to be. Correct. Which goes to the point that leather is sold in gradients. It's sold 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. Very rarely will you find leather that is 3 ounce, 2 ounce, 5 ounce.
And if you did, somebody worked very hard to get it there
Oh
for
my,
you.
and it's probably expensive because everything had to be perfect. So, okay, just picture this. You got a full side of leather. Most of our viewers are familiar with a full side leather. And you're running it through this big machine. It's 8 to 9 ounce and you want it to be 6 to 7. Well, let's back up. Let's say it's 8 to 9 ounce and you want it to be a flat out level 8. Is that going to happen? It's not. So,
And the splitter can be two different ways. Like Kevin said, the top roller can be your fix. Actually, the bottom roller can be a fix. Either way, but there is a fluctuation in there to allow that piece of leather to go through the splitter. And so I've always explained it like a bandsaw where you
laying on its side.
right, laying on its side where you run a piece of wood through and you split it into pieces. And then the combination of a planer, because a planer goes through and just takes it off into chunks. But it has grinding stones on it that you can set to keep the blade sharp all the time. And it is going to give you layers of that piece of leather. But the wider that gets, the more flex there is in those wheels.
Well,
Which is why you can be thinner or thicker
right, or the flex in the rollers.
yes.
So picture this. You've got this 3-foot wide side of leather going between these two rollers. Rollers that are 6 feet long. There is not a way in the world that leather can come out of there absolutely perfect if it's a cow side like a piece of skirting. The reason is going back to what we talked about, the fiber structure of the leather.
Okay, well, I do, but I want to ask you a question. When a tannery does this, what do they do with that?
Well, it depends on the tannery. Hopefully they have a customer that will buy it.
Like,
Somebody that makes part of an inner sole with a shoe.
okay, so filler, this is.
Or it could be, or they might sell it to another tannery that makes suede splits or finished splits.
So, nothing goes to waste. So, in other words, if you want suede, this is what you are going to, the equivalent, maybe not this, but the equivalent is going to be a split.
So we'll run this thing through some kind of wheel that snurfles it up on the top and snurfles it up on the back.
That's quite a word.
It's in the dictionary, SLC dictionary.
And then they'll stick a whole bunch of these in a big drum and they'll tumble them all up till they get nice and soft and smushy. And then they'll put color in there and it's all very happy. You got a lovely little finished split. Or, as Rusty was almost ready to tell you, they'll take this piece of leather and they will spray it and coat it and doctor it up, and then you've got what's called a finished split, which could be a pretty darn nice piece of leather.
So, upholstery,
Okay,
is that where you're going to see the majority of finished split?
well, you see at least some. There's a lot of finished split upholstery.
Okay, so automotive upholstery,
Yeah.
finished, or couch.
Cow upholstery.
So,
Got that cow upholstery.
anyway, that's where you're going to see a lot of it used. You will also see a lot of it used in the handbag industry.
And the accessories.
Right, because it's perfectly usable leather. It's perfectly good,
It's just a lot cheaper.
Right,
Yeah.
which is funny because it actually takes a lot of work to turn it into something. But again, it goes back to the not wasting of the leather industry, and that's one thing that I really appreciate is that in the woodworking world you have sawdust. Well, in the leather world you have leather dust.
And that was one of the most interesting things. We were up at Herman Oak getting a tour, and they had this huge box just full of leather dust. And I was like, "What are you guys gonna do with this?" They sell it to some dude that like stuffs horse hooves
It's used in
and
the
makes like a medicine.
Yeah. And in
Well,
hooves.
that's neat.
And so we sell it as
Embossing filler. Right.
Yeah.
so.
So we made a short video out there with the Camoga and the Turner. So hopefully we can play that and you guys can get to see it. And then we're gonna get to some questions as well.
All right.
Well, let's talk about that hole in this piece of leather for just a minute, because this is a pretty good example. This looks to me like it came off of a shoulder.
Okay. I'll buy
I'm
it.
guessing it probably did. And the shoulder area of a piece of veg tan cowhide really has some variance in the feel the hand, the fiber structure, because shoulder areas, you've got deep grooves where the little cow turns his head all the time.
Which is what these are across the top.
Yeah,
Moo cow
so-
grooves.
A lot of fat wrinkles on his neck.
Yeah, and when this piece of leather is running between those rollers with all that pressure, and it rolls over an area getting close to the belly, for instance, where the fibers are soft and loose, well, guess what happens? All that pressure on that roller doesn't go away, it's still there, so it's able to push down a little bit further that piece of leather. So the belly area often is thinner than the actual weight of the leather. If you buy an 8 to 9 ounce side of Herman oak, and we cut the belly off, and we put a gauge on that belly, what's it gonna measure? Probably 7 to 8. That's the way it is. But that's kind of nice, because when you get a side, like if you're making holsters and sheaths, and you're making a wide variety of products, well, then you can get into that armpit pocket, and you'll have a softer, thinner piece of leather that will stretch over whatever it is you need to stretch. And you can use the belly part for sheaths and what have you, and you can use the back part of the hide for a belt and a holster back.
So we're showing a little bit of the video about exactly what you're talking about and splitting it. I don't know if you can see that little screen up there.
Ooh, that's exciting. I can't see nothing. I got my glasses on. Now I can't see anything. I don't have them on.
So when we gauge a piece of leather, can you use the plastic gauge that we have and run it along the edge of it? Or how is leather being gauged?
Why don't you tell them the truth, and why don't you have somebody go get a gauge?
All right, let me go grab one while the video's playing.
So, and while we're talking about these little plastic gauges, they certainly do have a use.
Oh, they absolutely have a use.
If you want to know how thick your leather is, or how thick your wallet back is, you can take that little plastic gauge with all the little happy little grooves in it, and you can stick it onto the edge of that wallet back, and that'll be pretty doggone accurate. But if you want to know how thick your side of leather is, or your large piece.
Where do you get this gauge from?
It's in the shop.
It's off a half ounce. Needs to be adjusted.
It does need to be adjusted. Then you need a real honest-to-goodness leather gauge. These stupid things cost a fortune.
$300 and some dollars. $280.
They got them laying around and people drop them, and that's crazy. But the advantage is you can get an accurate measurement, very accurate. It's like any other piece of equipment. It has to be calibrated every now and then, because the way you get an accurate measurement is to open it up, you allow that gauge to snap down. That gives you a firm seat, and you'll get an accurate reading. Now, if you pull this, right now this one's measuring 4 and a little over a half. What happens if I pull this? Uh-oh, there she goes. It's going down. Now it's measuring almost just a hair over 4. It was a hair over 4.5. Now it's a hair over 4. That's due to the fiber structure of the leather going through those rollers with all that pressure.
So the plastic gauge that we sell is one that has a notch in it that will allow you to go in maybe 1/8 of an inch, and it'll show you the thickness of the leather. You can run it along and kind of get an idea of what it is. It's designed to give you just that, an idea of what the thickness of the leather is. Now, if you have a gauge that has a V cut in it, what's the problem with that, Liz?
It's because you can stretch it, so you can shove that leather in there, and then you can push it as hard as you want. Leather is squishy.
Oh, hey, it goes in more than that.
Yeah, a V-cut
Yeah.
plastic gauge or metal gauge is not good, because you have it's very difficult to discern the actual point of contact between the two edges.
Right, because
measurement.
you just want it to barely touch the edge on a V gauge like that, because you're going to press the leather together, or you're going to stretch the gauge out. And so that's why we decided to do something more along the lines of this, and I'm sure they'll show you a better picture.
Yeah, I'd like to say something here too. We mentioned that you have to calibrate these things, because when you do that often enough, out over a period of time, these things are screwed down tighter than bark on a tree. But
Thank you.
But anyway, if you can readjust it, and then you get an accurate ounce measurement, and you also get a millimeter measurement.
Okay.
Which is really, really nice.
Okay, so what does weight of leather mean? Why do we refer to it as weight?
You know, I can't keep that in my head.
I know this.
Instead of square foot,
Go, Liz.
it's not painted. So
If it's not painted.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
So the weight, the reason we refer to it by weight is because it's how much that piece of leather weighs per square foot. So like
Literally
the weight of the piece. So if you've got a square foot of 2 to 3 ounce, it will weigh 2 to 3 ounces of that
Per square foot.
leather. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the millimeters is going to be much more accurate to tell you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
but they're interchangeable. And so if you tell us that it's 1 millimeter thick, we're going to know that it's approximately 4 ounces.
Yeah, now, here's a problem that we run into here in customer service. We've got many of our customers or new customers have bought a leather gauge that measures both in ounces and millimeters. They bought it from someone else, that's fine. So they order a piece of leather from us, they get it in, they say, Kevin, this is not 4 to 5 ounce
Hey,
leather.
that wasn't right. 1 millimeter is not 4 ounces.
I know, but they get it in there and they look at their, I ordered 4 to 5 ounce leather, Kevin. This is barely over 1.5 ounces. Okay, why? How can that happen? Well, it really almost can't happen here. Number one, we can't even split the leather down to 1.5 ounces. Unless we get lucky, like we
Or
did
we're
not.
doing teeny tiny pieces.
Like we did not get lucky on this. So, we have to be hopefully smart enough to ask some questions. 1.5 ounce, sir, or ma'am, how did you get it? Do you have a picture? Sure. So we get a picture like this and we can't see it. But guess what happens? They've got their little gauge turned over so they're reading millimeters. And what is millimeters? 1.6 is 4 ounce leather. They wanted 4 ounce leather. They didn't know that they had to turn the gauge over and read the gauge in ounces instead of millimeters. Now, another part, hand me that little plastic thing, would you please? You saw what happened when I drugged that gauge across this piece of leather and it went from over 4.5 to 4? Well, Kevin, I ordered 4 to 5 ounce leather and I really needed it heavy. I told them I wanted heavier leather. This is barely 4 and I've got a leather gauge. Oh yeah, you got a leather gauge, all right. And it measures right here on the edge where the leather comes through the splitter. All that pressure's right there on the edge. So the leather is 3.5 ounce right there on the very edge, and that's what they're measuring.
So what you're saying is if you want an accurate measurement,
You have to
you would
measure
need to
here.
cut a piece so that you can measure
Yeah,
in a little
if
further.
you do nothing else, cut a little area in somewhere and measure that. So anyway, splitting is a never-ending challenge for us, but we get by.
Okay,
If
so
somebody wanted to order their leather split down on our website, what would be a way that they could do that?
So right now we do have a nice little customer comment box whenever you check out. And you just need to put in there, you know, which leather, if you're buying multiple leathers, which leather you're wanting split down, and we will do our best for you. Honestly, if you do ask for a piece of leather split down to 1.5 ounces, we're probably gonna contact you and tell you that that's not really something that we like to do, because more often than not, we end up with spaghetti and then we have to try again. It's not very happy. And then there is a charge for it.
But I'd like to have my deer skin split.
Oh, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Because some pieces of leather, they're not happy
No.
to be split. It's not that you can't split deer skin, because you can, as long as you have the right $50,000 splitter that's set up correctly. Then you can do that.
That isn't even a drop in the bucket on the right splitter for that.
I know. So when you're splitting veg tan leather, that is one thing. Splitting chrome tan leather is another. And there's all kinds of variants in between here to enable a person to get the split that they want on the leather that they're using.
Yeah, the temper of the leather
Oh.
is as important as anything.
Yeah,
The
like
temper.
Liz said, we don't want to split a piece of 2 to 3 ounce soft tan veg leather down to 1.5 to 2. We don't want to do that. That leather's soft, it's squishy, it bunches up.
Well, what about taking a piece of 8 to 9 ounce and trying to split it down to even 7 to 8? What's the problem there?
Well, that's a great issue that you raised. The problem there is that you might be able to do it and you might not. That's just what it is.
And that's a fact. And so usually what you'll find us doing, and the reason we would come out with more than one layer, is it's easier to sneak up on a thickness of leather than it is to just set the machine up and
It's
just
like you kind of have to, you know, sneak up.
How's everything feeling today? What are we
Yeah,
gonna get?
what mood is the splitter in
What are you
today?
doing there, Kyle? So much comes down to the piece of leather.
I mean, definitely if you have questions, like call us and ask, and if it's not something that we've done for you before, it's not a regular thing that you have done, definitely give us a call, and we'll do our best to kind of walk you through it, if it's an option or not.
Kevin's gonna hit me for asking this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I want you to split my leather that I bought from somewhere else.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I
Will you
guess
do it?
so much depends on that piece of leather. If you hand me a piece of veg tan leather that's a square foot, and they say, hey, I got this down at the flea market, and some guy was giving it away free with a snow cone or something,
Try to get my leather to snow cone shop.
I would look at that piece of
Pineapple
leather.
whip, you know?
How thick do you want it? And he said, well, it's 8 to 9 now. I really need 4 to 5. I'm only making one thing. I just need that. I'll look at it and say, oh, here's what I'll do. I'll try. I can't promise you anything. I think I can do it, and I'll get you as close as I can. And if he says to me, hey, that's all I can ask. It was free with a snow cone. If you screw it up, nobody's out anything. I'll take and I'll split his piece of leather. But when some guy comes in and he says, I'm making a very specific what's it for a who's it, and I have to have this leather split exactly to 1.5 ounce. And this piece over here, I want to have split exactly to 4. It can't be 4.5, and it can't be 3 3/4. I need it split exactly. Can you do that? I'll pay you whatever you ask. No.
Because you really just get one shot at this, guys.
So, I tell you what, here's the deal. I live in California,
Excuse me?
and I don't have any way to show you. What if I cut a swatch off and sent it to you?
Well, you know, we get swatches all the time. And we've learned about swatches the hard way, especially when we get them from a tannery. So here's, we've got all this leather to sell. Would you like to see a swatch? Well, no, I would not like to see a swatch. I would like to see a skin, or maybe 2 or 3. That way I know what I'm looking at. And boy, will those swatches be different from the skins many times. So when Rusty wants to send me a swatch from California, that person's gonna cut the edge off their hide somewhere, and I'm gonna look at it, and I have no idea really.
And then somebody's gonna sit and do what I've been doing to the corner of this piece of leather for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Move it around.
And then it's gonna change the temper of the leather. And where was the swatch cut from?
So that was one of the questions as well. Shoulders, backs, bellies, butts, how do they split differently as it stretches across it?
The fibers in the leather will dictate the split.
If they are all attached, they're not separate cuts, then the split is going to be within 2 ounces, 7 to 8 ounces, pretty much.
So ideally, it really works out better to split parts, does it not?
Oh, yeah, maybe, I have a good way to illustrate that. If we split the side and the splitter is set at 7 to 8 ounce, hopefully it's gonna come out at what, 7.5, right? That's what we're gonna be close. And the belly's gonna be thinner, back's gonna be a little bit heavier, shoulder might fall off a little bit, the butt's gonna be a little bit heavier, just like let me see. But if we run, I wasn't sure where he was going. If we run
A wallaback.
something larger.
Okay.
If we run a single bend through the splitter,
So no belly, no shoulder.
no belly, no shoulder, just a single bend. And if we have a little gauge that says we want 8 ounce, we'll set it at 3.2, is that correct? 3.2. And we'll run it through our very expensive Komoga splitter. Now, it is gonna do a great job, and it's gonna come out really, really close to 8 ounce. Set at 3.2. So we're gonna split the belly down to 8 ounce. That might have to be set at 3.4.
Because of the fiber structure.
Exactly. So that's it. Challenge.
Oil tans.
Oh, lovely. Temper of the leather.
Yeah, that is your guys' favorite thing to ask us to split.
Yeah, and I'm the worst. I am.
Like the Oxfords come out really well. So
That's
if we want to
because
talk
they have a
specifically,
firm
because
temper.
they're really firm leather, but you start getting into like Tennessee whiskey maybe.
Well,
Would be a
you
good
get into
one.
that, you get into the temper being different, and then you also get into the oil and wax content.
Mhm.
The oil and the wax content will change the temper of the leather, which will cause it to squish more when it comes through, which that squish doesn't go away. If you've ever seen anybody
It builds
roll
up.
out dough, right. So if you're rolling out dough, that squish builds up and pushes towards whatever end. You know, ideally, I always split with the neck first, and then, or, I mean, that to
Yeah.
me is ideal because the
You're
temper of the
starting
butt.
small and you're
Exactly.
going bigger. Another thing that happens is something that we call grab. Okay, so when you're splitting a piece of leather and there's so much wax in this particular area or so much oil, all of a sudden it grabs the leather and it starts to feed through at a slant. Well, that's not a big deal if your piece of leather is only a foot long.
It's a side.
But if it's 5 feet long or 4 feet long, you can't just straighten that out. It does not happen.
Now, once
have to
the
reverse
splitter,
it. Yeah.
once the splitter has it, you have to literally either
You gotta take what
reverse
you
it,
get.
or you have to release
Or
the
stop.
pressure and stop and get it out. But then it's a challenge when you've got a piece of leather that's half split.
To restart.
You gotta spin it around and come in from the other side and hope that it meets up.
Well, so if it grabs it and it turns that piece of leather a little bit, so that all of a sudden, and hopefully you can see this piece of leather, you start it like this, but it starts going in like this. And this side over here starts getting real close to the edge of the splitter. And as soon as you hit the edge of that splitter, it is bunched up and grabbing and wadding up, and you've got,
Because the blade is going through it like this. Any other questions?
So say somebody bought this piece of leather that we have here on the table. will we send them the splits off of it?
Typically, yes,
Well, most of the time.
if it's usable.
Yeah, but if you request it, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of times people don't want it, but I mean, if you request it, sure. But normally, though, ideally, we're not splitting to order unless it was very specific. So now, just because we've got 8 to 9 ounce double shoulders and we sell 4 to 5 ounce double shoulders, well, we may be splitting those, but we're going to split 50 at a time or 100 at a time and get that process taken care of so that we can just roll the leather up and send it out when the order comes in. So it would have to be something very specifically requested.
Yeah. And you can put that in the box as well and request it, and if we can't do it, we'll call you and let you know.
I mean, why put in a piece of tearing, crappy cheesecloth that won't hold nothing? It's dust held together by fibers.
So Darcy had a question as well.
Of course you do. Darcy's great interacting with.
She's been around for a minute, so she knows some of the questions that come through. A piece of leather, through its journey of its life of becoming a sellable product for us before we send it to the customer, how many times could it be gauged?
Oh my gosh. Well, for one thing, how many times would it be gauged at the tannery?
Right.
So, you know, there's 2 different styles of splitting. There's wet splitting and there's dry splitting. And so the dry splitting is what we do. It's done with a dry blade. It's dry. A wet split will be done in the tannery, and then they're separated by the thickness of the hide, because if it's a cow, it's going to have a tendency to be lighter weight than if it was a steer or a bull. And so there's a matter of gauging there that's probably not nearly this technologically advanced, but they are gauging it by feel to get the 2 different.
They want to get that first split is designed to reduce the thickness of the hide so that they're not wasting effort tanning this great big thick gunky old hide with all that crap on the back.
Because they're the heaviest that they produce, so.
So they get it down
Terminal
to a
gets
manageable level,
20
and then they
ounces
tan it, and then they start splitting.
Right, because every amount of thickness in the piece of leather takes up tanning solution.
Yes.
And when you tan 1 million square feet of leather,
In a week.
it begins to add up pretty quick.
And fine, the thicker it is, the longer it takes to tan it all the way to the middle.
Exactly. And is also in some very heavy bull hides that you could find a piece of rawhide where the tanning liquors did not make it all the way through and actually tan the leather itself. So how many times could a piece of leather be gauged?
Well, after it leaves the tannery, it comes to us, and we open this roll of wonderful Herman oak leather or import veg leather, and somebody's saying, Kevin, this roll says 10 to 11. I don't know, it doesn't feel like 10 to 11, so we'll get our happy little gauge and we'll stick it on there in 3 or 4 places. Yeah, that's 10 to 11, okay, well, it sure doesn't feel like it. Okay, sorry, but the gauge don't lie, so it's 10 to 11. So we've done that. Now we decide, let's make some belts. So we'll take that, boy, this is a piece of 10 to 11 that we can't sell. It's just got too many imperfections. So what let's do, let's cut the belly off of it, cut the shoulder off of it. We'll run it into belts, and we'll take those belts with all the flaws in it. We'll sell them outside on the table for a reduced price. But there's about 8 or 9 belts that are really good in that bin. So we'll take those. They're 10 to 11. Well, that's a little heavy for a belt. So we'll split those down to 9 ounce. So there's your gauge again. And we split them. And yep, they're 9 ounce. So we're good to go. And from that point on, they become a belt. I think they're done.
Well, and so if you don't buy a full side of leather, so let's say you want to buy a couple of square feet, well, we cut leather, right? Okay, so I've cut on this piece of leather once already and I've rolled it up and I've marked it, but I'm not gonna just take it off the shelf, unroll it, and cut your piece off of it, wrap it up and send it. I'm gonna put the gauge on it to make sure that it got marked correctly.
Right.
Because it's so easy to just imperfect it, imperfection, so.
Yeah.
So if somebody is new to the leather world, how would you explain what's the purpose of splitting leather?
to reduce the thickness?
So, you know, if you're making a bag, let's say you're making a bag out of like a 5 ounce, 4.5, 5 ounce oil tan, and you want to make the gusset around the edge. You want the bag to have some flex. So maybe you'll take and cut all your parts out, and then you'll run that gusset through the splitter to split it down to make it softer. And so your 4 or 5 ounce leather will have one temper, and then the split leather will have another temper. So for me, the way that, yes, what Kevin said is absolutely correct, to reduce the thickness. But for me, I like to explain it this way, to make all of the leather usable.
Would be like if you wore a sweatshirt in the summer,
My daughter.
it might be really warm. But if you wear a thinner material, it fits you better and it breathes a little bit better. That's a way to think of it, like in the leather world. If you want your bag to not stand
You
out.
explain that to her.
No, because my daughter does the same thing.
That's a good thing.
I do not.
That's a good thing to bring up, because we get these questions on a very, very regular basis. What's the best thickness of leather to use for such and such and such and such? Well, the answer to that question is it all depends on what you want to end up with, or what you are trying to end up with. That's the whole deal. Because, hey, I'm making an old wallet for Grandpa. He's a masonry guy. He works out in the concrete all day, and I want it to not wear out. Well, then your leather's going to be a little heavier. But I'm making a wallet for Uncle Bart, and he's a stockbroker, and he never carries his wallet anywhere but in his vest pocket. So that's going to be a thinner leather.
So in other words, you could also think about it, the difference between a work belt or a dress belt.
Yeah.
Your dress belts usually will be thinner, they'll be a little narrower, they'll be a little bit more finer, refined, that's the word I'm looking for. So really, you know, being able to split the leather allows you to utilize all the parts and pieces.
Yep. And to end up with what you want to end up with.
So for Benjamin's the one that was asking if we could split it and send in the other pieces, and he was talking, I think, English chestnut bridle. Benjamin, if you would just call in and talk to us about it, and we'll see what we can get worked out with. He said he can't really split it at home, but he would like to use the split parts of it of a lining of what he's
Well, that makes
using.
sense, because on the bridle, the backs are finished.
The backs are pasted.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, so just
And actually, you know, especially on like a bridle or a something that's pasted like that on the back, the split, if it's left thick enough, can make a fine sheath. Hatchet covers, you can make a holster out of it. There's a number of different things. It all is going to depend on the thickness of the leather that you begin with and what you split it down to, and especially when you're shooting a video and people just pop in because they don't look up at the red light. You know,
It's Clayton.
It's Clayton, and the red light's literally in his face due to height. You know,
he doesn't see that light over there. Normally he's on this side of it.
Anyway, some leathers are a joy to split. Some leathers are just a
joy.
not a joy, they're less than a joy.
All right, David, we answered kind of David's question was the one about the reasoning behind it, so he liked the explanation there. So if there's any other questions that are out there, let us know. Next week, Liz.
I think I'm gonna do something.
That
really.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna try to make a knife sheath for you guys. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I gotta tell you, that person, that one, she makes really good. I get to watch her make one of her. You should do that. I'm never gonna say anything that nice about you again ever.
Especially not in public on camera.
Well, that's it. If you guys want to see the Turner, we got a video of the Turner. We're going to play it after this, but if there's no other questions, I bought
Got one more. Stacy just stood up.
Rick says, I bought some of the Herman Oak Craftsman grade sides. Why do they seem to be so dry?
I don't. Fair question. Well, for one thing, it's a dry leather. The process is dry. Normally, heat will cause dryness. It's hard to say. Every piece of leather is so different. Age could change it, but usually the turnover on the leather from the tannery is pretty quick.
Herman oak doesn't sit around long enough
No.
to really be
He
effective.
was finding some cracking going on with it. Maybe it just needs.
Well, and
depends on how far you bend it.
and that's a fact, and it depends on how thick it is.
Right.
So the
How
thicker
you
it
go
is,
about bending.
right,
Right.
the thicker it is, I would always recommend a little bit of moisture
Yeah.
when you get ready to do like the turn back on a belt.
And don't just,
Yeah, and like I say too, the thickness. So that's where you take a 6-inch splitter and you do the turn back. You pull it through and you just split off the end of the belt so that it's thinner, so that when it does turn, it doesn't crack right there.
Yeah.
and some areas of, a lot of people don't realize that bench tanned leather is ironed.
Yeah.
At the tannery, it is ironed. And if you iron anything, it gets rid of wrinkles. There's a shock for you. It gets rid of wrinkles and it makes it firmer. It gives it a certain amount of firmness to the top of the leather.
It compresses the fibers too.
Yes.
So the Herman Oak has put into place here in the last year or so a heated roller press that they run their sides through, and that does just exactly
Takes
what
care of
Kevin
the iron.
says. It lays the sides out smoother. It does compress the fibers of the leather as well.
So-
I don't know if you guys do this, but cows aren't flat.
I know, right? Or square. So weird.
If you get a side that has an area that has had more pressure put on it perhaps than other parts of the hide, that will have a tendency to leave the finish, the surface of the leather, a tad bit harder and firmer. And like Rusty said, if you moisten it either from the back or the top, and you bend it slowly and get to that point, then you shouldn't have a problem. That's about the only thing I can think of.
Sure. All right. So
Benjamin wants to know when we're going to do a sewing machine question and answer.
I say we do it.
It's on the docket. We're also going to be doing a laser video.
Awesome.
Going to get Chad on this side of the camera and do a laser video. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to do a Q&A on the sewing machine. Anytime.
We'll
so
drag some machines in here.
drag them in here. And,
As soon as we've got all of them in stock.
Right.
all right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. It was a pleasure. And
Have a great weekend.
until next time.
Yep.
We're off.
Yep, you're good. We're going to watch that Turner video.
Okay.
You guys are good.